Hi, everyone. We're going to do a little bit of damage control today. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to handle these out of control claims. I get this email probably once or twice a week on how the heck am I going to handle this report? I was left with a mess. I get you. I understand. So it's okay. Just sit down, listen to this, and I'll walk you through the first steps so that you can at least get started along the way. Welcome back to another edition of Nobody Told Me That. I wanted to once again dip into my mailbag and give you some tips on how to handle the situation that we all really just hate to be in, which is I've inherited a mess. My accounts receivable, my insurance is just a mess. What the heck am I supposed to do? I know. I have been through this so many times. When I was offering this as a service, it was something that I really enjoyed doing because I like to get in there and clean up a mess. But when you've done it enough times, you think to yourself, geez, just a couple little things could have prevented this whole situation. That's another topic for another podcast. But I did want to go over some of the quick triage methods that you can do if you do find yourself in this situation. And I will tell you that a lot of the conversations I have are with doctors who find themselves in this situation and they don't really know how to even start. So if you're an office manager and you find yourself in this situation, okay, well, that's fine. At least we know what we're doing as far as, running the reports and everything. Think about these poor doctors that just, a lot of times they don't even go into the business part of the software unless they have to. So whether you're a dentist trying to figure this out or whether you're a new admin person or an office manager that's inherited this mess, I'm going to give you a couple tips so that we can get started, get you along the way. This is not meant to be comprehensive because I know that there's a lot of work that goes into this and you're going to be doing this for quite a little bit of time, but let's get started with at least getting you on the right track. So first things first, I need you to run some reports, and that means going into your software. And if this is a new software, all of them have help documents on that you can go to the website, go into their support panels and find out, how to run these specific reports. I'm looking for the insurance claim aging report. So there's aging report. And usually if you run it in any software, it's going to give you everything that's owed to you, patient balance, insurance balance. That's not what I'm necessarily looking for. Patient balance, definitely important, but not the topic of today's conversation. So we're talking about insurance aging. These are the claims that are still just kind of hanging out there. We don't know if they've made it to the clearinghouse or the carrier. We don't know. We just have no idea. So I'm going to assume we're going in blind and that we're just going to find out what it's going to be. Now, I know, for example, if you're in a 2 to 3 doctor office, couple hygienists, it's not abnormal if the system has not been paid attention to. It is not abnormal to run 20, 30 pages worth of claims. There are some softwares that automatically print statuses. For example, if you printed it, it's going to print on the report. That's really annoying. I wish they didn't do that because it lengthens my report. So if you end up even at 40, it's pretty normal, right? But if you are above 40, 50, still don't freak out. The vast majority of the claims that you're going to have to triage are usually easily handled by resubmitting. A lot of times it's just they didn't get to the clearinghouse, they didn't leave your software, or if they got to the clearinghouse, they just sat there and nobody took the last step to submit them. So I've run into that, and it was kind of a sad state of affairs. This doctor thought their insurance person was submitting claims, and all they were doing was sending it to the clearinghouse. They didn't take the last step and actually hit the button to submit them through the clearinghouse, and that was a mess. So the question that I get, because there are clearinghouses out there that will charge you per submission, and it adds up, especially if you're a doctor and you're, starting out and you've already taken a hit, you're losing money, and you know that you're going to have to pay per submission, and you probably already submitted these before. So you're getting double billed, unfortunately. And that is why I always recommend using a clearinghouse that is a one fee, unlimited submissions. In today's environment, most of the people working on the insurance end, they're not veterans. A lot of them are new to the industry. We're training people all of the time. Resubmissions happen. And I just think in this day and age with the cost the way they are, I'm not sure why people are paying for per claim submission. So if you are in a situation like that and you can't get out of it, well, just keep your eyes and ears open. Maybe the situation changes. But if you have the option to change to one that doesn't charge you per submission, that is 100% what I would do. So that being said, you're going to run your reports. You're going to identify exactly what you're looking at. Your reports are going to sort them by carrier. That's how I want to look at them. And you'll notice in one of the next ones coming up, one of the next steps, we're going to work per carrier. And so I want to know exactly what we're looking at. Now, when it comes to running these reports regularly, so say you've done all of the steps we're going to talk about, and you are going to think, oh my gosh, I did a great job, because you should really pat yourself on the back if that happens, right? When that happens, you're going to want to run this report on a regular basis. So just getting the claims out the door and getting them out, you're going to need to do some follow-up. So I recommend getting into a cadence. If you're walking into a hot mess, getting into a cadence of about once a week running this report. Now, if you're one person dedicated to this task, then of course you're going to be running the report pretty much on a daily basis anyways, and that's fine. And then also your clearinghouse, you're going to be spending a lot of time on your clearinghouse, just making sure information got submitted or were there requests for additional information that you may have missed. Now, here's where we need to pay attention to what's on the report. So there's something called timely filing deadline. And what timely filing deadline is that you have usually a year from the date of service to submit your claims. And, if you're a very efficient office, you think to yourself, who on earth needs a year? But remember, not everybody's efficient. And I'm very grateful for a year, because when you're talking about secondary insurance and even tertiary insurance, I'm having to resubmit things. And so I would like to have that cushion and just hope that I don't ever need the full cushion. But beware, because some of the carriers have now shortened their timely filing deadlines. I've heard 6 months and I've been hearing 90 days. Now, 90 days is very, very short. If you think about it, just think logically here. If we were to submit a claim, maybe needed to clean it up, it was a primary claim, now we want to submit the secondary claim, we have to wait, get the EOB. This could easily be 45, 60 days. And if you're not paying attention, even more so. So knowing what your timely filing deadlines is very important. Because of that reason, if you're walking in and this has not been tended to in a while, I want you to go ahead and resubmit the claims. And I know what you're thinking. Well, Teresa, some of them are going to need, documentation. Some of them I got to double check. Okay, fine. Then what I want you to do is take a look at the claims that seem to be just lower dollar amounts, like your cleaning evals, the recare visits, right? Just resubmit those. I don't want you spending time calling and doing that. Just resubmit them. And if it comes back as a duplicate, then you'll know. Your clearinghouse will give you a message and say, this was a duplicate submission, or you'll get the electronic EOB from the carrier that says duplicate submission. That's fine. Now we know what to do. But I at least want to get it out the door, because I want to avoid the timely filing deadline. And if I'm coming in, I'm in emergency mode. Remember, I don't want to have to look up all these timely filings. I will just resubmit. Now, if you know for sure that they need documentation and you haven't sent any, like you're taking a look at it and you're like, wow, no one sent anything. Okay, so I get it. You're going to need to hold it. But I do want you to look at the date of service. And if you think you're coming close to any timely filing deadline, just send it out. That way it gets in the system. It will end up having a claim ID number attached to it, or a document control number is what we call it. And that way there's proof that it's in the system. Then when you go to submit documentation, you can reference that document control number, claim ID number, you can reference that. And then that way the documentation is attached to an existing claim. You're not sending in a duplicate claim. But remember, in this step here, I just want to beat the clock. And I'm really hoping none of you are at that point where you're at a year. But the 90 days, that scares me a little bit. And I worry about that. So what are you doing now after that? So you send all the claims and you're like, oh, I got to take a break. Okay. Because that was a lot. And it sounds like it's simple work, right? Just clicking a button and sending it. But you've got to do so much sorting. There's going to be some brain power involved, because you've got to keep track. And then what I definitely want you to do is leave yourself notes. Now, if you're mass resubmitting, you don't need to. Most of the softwares will track when you've resubmitted, printed, or batched a claim. But I do want you to leave notes for claims that you think you're going to have problems with. So this is where you're already expending brain power. So let's make a note of it so that you don't lose that. Some of the most wasted time I ever had as an insurance coordinator was thinking I was going to remember what happened with this claim. And then, as you get older, you realize you can't remember everything. So make sure that you leave yourself notes. Now we're going to check out the portals. And this is where I have to kind of slow down a little bit, because if you're coming into a mess, there's a good chance that you're not going to have portals set up, or there's a good chance that the passwords are not going to be available to you. I have seen some horrible situations where the former insurance coordinator changed passwords before she left, and basically, had locked people out. That means emails and time spent on the phone, and then days, because sometimes they have to reset the password using snail mail. So it's a real mess. So I'm hoping that you do not have that situation. Now, let's take a little bit of prevention moment here. In order to avoid those types of situations, doctors and managers, what I always recommend is that there is a master list of insurance passwords. So I understand that there might be multiple users at your office, and so you'll have different logins, but you as the business owner, the business manager, should have track of all of those passwords. It is company property. These aren't personal passwords. So I want you to keep it in a document or in some way. There's software out there that will help you to handle all of this. But I make it a rule, and this is the manager and me talking here. If passwords are changed without me knowing about it, then that is a disciplinary issue, because I am in protection mode, right? I want to make sure that nothing is going to harm the practice and the protocols that I put into place. When someone changes a password without checking with you, the manager owner, that's not protocol. There are permission levels. There's ways to do this. And if they need to change their password, it's really not hard for them to ping you in a communications or send you an email that says, hey, heads up, I need to change my password. And then they can slide it to you on a sticky note, because you don't want to email it, right? And then you can update your master password log. I do not mess around with this. There's only a handful of things that will cause me to go straight to, you are on your last leg in the office, and changing passwords and not caring about letting me know. That is definitely one of them. Now, you're going to log into your portal. So say it's smooth sailing. You're going to log into your portals. You're going to get in there. You're going to start looking for your claims. Now, thankfully, some of them are set up so that you can just look at submitted claims and you can do a quick match. Now, this is where your reports, it's going to be very important for you to run your reports by carrier. So we'll talk about that in a second. But first things first, I just want you to make sure that you can have access into your portals. And you notice I didn't do that first. The most important part is identifying the problem, getting stuff out the door, right? Checking your portals also includes your EFTs, any companies that you utilize to handle your EFTs. If you're using a third-party billing company, and maybe you're going to have them help you with this. And if you're very busy, it might be something to talk about. We can talk about that at the end. But what you're going to need to do is just make sure that you have access. If you're working with a third-party company that has a portal, you're going to need to make sure that you have access into the portal so that you can monitor the progress. And that is, we've really come a long way with that. I know way back in the past, having a third-party billing service was basically like you get a Word document at the end of the day with, I worked on this claim and this claim. And a lot of the companies have moved past that, and there's some real tracking mechanisms in place. And I hope that continues to improve, because revenue cycle, it's a big part of our day, right? Okay, so you're in the portals, you're able to identify, where you need to go. The other piece too is that you're going to need to have access to the bank account if you are going to reconcile the EFTs. Now, EFTs are electronic funds transfers. ACH, it's basically they're sending the payment directly to your bank. Now, here's where some doctors are going to maybe push back a little bit. And honestly, if you're walking into a dumpster fire, I kind of side with the doctor, because the doctor is feeling a little bit betrayed. They didn't see this coming. They feel like they should have saw it coming. There's a whole slew of, I don't want to say paranoia, but there's a whole slew of concern when something like this is happening in the office. So as somebody coming in and fixing it, I'm going to ask, do you allow access to the bank account? If that's not the case, then I'm going to need certain reports, whether you go through the doctor themselves or the bookkeeper, But if you're reconciling EFTs, you need access to bank account statements so that you can check and make sure that everything is matching up. Now, if you have not ever worked with EFTs, their ADA has a guide on it. I'll put it in the show notes. But if you've never worked with EFTs before, I would urge you to reach out to somebody, maybe one of your office manager friends, or, check on one of your trusted Facebook pages and find out, what are the workflows with EFTs. You can even ask ChatGPT. I'm sure that they'll be happy to give you a workflow for EFTs. The reason I'm cautioning you on this is if you've never dealt with EFTs, you will waste a lot of time trying to figure out how they're laid out, how to read the bank accounts, how to read the document numbers, the tracking numbers. It's almost like a little, foreign language, but once you learn it, you're fine. But the learning curve, especially if you've never seen it, is probably going to be big. Now, if you are still on paper checks and, in this situation, cleaning up, I'm almost preferring that you would have paper checks, but our industry has really moved to electronic transactions. I'm just saying from a cleanup point of view, paper checks would be much better. Okay. So you're going to check the EFT deposits. And what I find often when I used to do this and, talking to managers that are going through this, is that they'll go into the bank account and find huge amounts of money just sitting there. And what has happened is that the claims were paid, you received the payment, but whomever was handling the EFTs never bothered to reconcile them. And so that's why you have a ton of claims outstanding. And there's the money. It's just that nobody has gone through, reconciled, and closed out the claims. And I know what you're thinking. Well, wait a second, Teresa. I just submitted all these claims again. I know. You're going to get duplicates. I'm okay with that. What I did was I just triage. Remember, we're triaging, making sure that you're not going to miss that window. Okay, so my hope is that you do log in to your portals and there's all the money. That's what my hope is. Unfortunately, that's not always what happens. Many times when claims are outstanding, it is due to documentation needing to be gathered and resubmitted. Now, this is a good time for you to evaluate whether or not you want to leave EFTs for a little bit just to get things under control. I would actually, if you've got it all set up, because that is a pain, if you've got it all set up, I would see if you could power through it. One tip that I'll give you, and I've cleared this with CPAs, dental CPAs specifically, is that I recommend having a separate bank account for your EFTs. So the separate bank account would be tied to the main account. And what would happen is you could ask the bank to designate it as deposit only, and all of your EFT payments are going to go in there. That way, when your doctor or bookkeeper, when you ask them for the EFT reports, they don't have to go into the main account and give you everything. I've worked with my doctor for years and years, but I really don't want to see the bank account. I know what I need to see to look at expenses and all of that, but I don't want to see some of the other things. It's not that it's not my business because it's business stuff, but when I'm working with insurance, I don't want to see everything else. I just want to see the transactions that have to do with the task at hand. So if you have a separate account that's made for just that, you're good. So if you're not set up that way, then go ahead and see if you can talk to the bank and get that set up. It's usually a very simple transaction. And doctors, this is something that I wouldn't delegate to your office manager. Unfortunately, I've seen situations where office managers have gone to open secondary bank accounts. They've been in the community a long time. They've been with the doctor a long time. And the second bank account is opened. And guess who walked away with a lot of insurance deposits? And the main doctor didn't even know, because guess where all of the statements went? To the practice. So the horror stories that I could tell you, there's just shady people out there. There really are. Okay, so moving on. Now comes the part that's just mind-numbing, because you've identified which claims are truly outstanding because you've looked to see if the EFTs are there, and then you get done reconciling them. You also, by the way, are going to look around the office and make sure that there's not some weird stack of checks sitting around somewhere. And I know that you're laughing because you're like, well, what are you talking about? I remember I have worked with multiple offices where they were panicked, they cleaned things up, they triaged, they did everything that I'm talking about. Then 6 months later, 3 months later, I'll get a call from the manager and they'll say, you're not going to believe what I found when we moved some boxes in the old operatory. And sure enough, it's just piles and piles of insurance checks. All right. I know. Again, the horror stories I could tell you. So the hard work is we're going to start whittling down the report. And this is where it's really important to go by carrier. So you're going to, hopefully you're going to have them in alphabetical order. And I don't want you to work this report to death. I want you to pick the oldest claims, right? So if you're looking at MetLife and you're like, okay, they have a lot of claims, a lot of big dollar amounts, I'm going to tackle MetLife. That's fine. But I don't want you to hop around the report. I want you to pick a carrier that you deem to be the most important, the most outstanding carrier, not outstanding like amazing carrier, but outstanding in money. That's the one we're going to start with. All right. So you're going to log into the portal. You're going to find these claims. If the claim's not there, don't sit and keep looking for it. Just, you hit resubmit already, so you're good. However, if you're doing this part and you resubmitted a few days ago and it's still not showing up in the portal, there is a disconnect with the clearinghouse. And so you're going to have to double check. Could it be that there's a setting that's been missing? Well, possibly. I mean, we did have the huge Change Healthcare debacle. Perhaps the software switched and maybe your settings aren't updated. Whatever the issue is, if you're logging in to do the claims inquiries and it's been a couple days since you've submitted that first mad batch, if it's not showing up, there's something else going on, and you're going to have to Scooby-Doo your way through that to find out, what is the actual issue. Does that mean calling claim support? Yes, probably. And I am no fan of claim support or customer support. I really hate customer support. If there's a chat, I'm happy to jump on that. But, sometimes chat doesn't do very well either. So this is the part where it gets a little bit painful. I hate to tell you. Okay, so say the claims are there. You're going to double check, make sure, are they requesting additional information? This is always what we find. We find that, and it could be even for low dollar amounts. So if it's being held up, what is the reason? Pop open the claim on the portal and ask them, and take a look. What are the reason codes? And then either print or save to PDF, save them in a folder that is, to work. And that's the next thing that you're going to do. The next day, you're going to work on that. I want you to go systematically. What one office did, very interesting, is she didn't want to burn out. So what she did was the first day, she picked the bigger carrier that had the most amount, the bigger carrier, and she worked on that. Then the next day, she worked on a tiny little carrier, and then, maybe like 4 claims outstanding. And then she worked on fulfilling the documentation request for the one she'd worked the day before. So she didn't feel like she was tackling big, huge carriers all the time, because honestly, you're going to look at the report and see, what I would consider to be low-hanging fruit. You can pluck off those claims pretty quickly. Some of the websites are very easy to use. And so if you're really good with it and you're comfortable, then just zip on in there and find out. Delta Dental, their toolkit has greatly improved. I can really whip through there very easily. Guardian and Principal have chatbots that are very easy to use. And so, if I want to pick those off and there's only a handful, that's absolutely what I would do. You are likely going to have a very big carrier that's going to make up the most of the outstanding claims. So just, you're not going to eat, what is that saying? You're not going to eat the whole cookie at one time. You're going to take little nibbles. You got to pace yourself. You're going to get frustrated and you're going to get really angry at the person that left you this mess. Sometimes in my classes, I will make jokes of, who's had to clean up a mess, and people will laugh, and go, oh yeah, and they'll commiserate. And then I'll say, well, who would like a voodoo doll or, a target of that person? And, people will laugh. And it's because usually it's somebody that really didn't do a good job. And if you worked with that person, then you know who that person is. And so you can't help but be like, man, why didn't she do her job? Or why didn't he just say that he needed help? You get kind of mad and angry, but you know what? It's past. Let it go. You've got to focus. You got a task on hand. And that person was so inept at their job, they should not be taking up rent in your head. So just let it go. All right. Now, the most important part about number 5 here, which is the, calling, chatting, inquiring about claims. Most important part is you have to leave yourself notes. If somebody says to you, we received it, can you call back in a week? That's got to be in the notes. Don't leave yourself little Post-it notes. I do know some ladies who are really happy using a spreadsheet so they can leave themselves notes. I mean, that's fine, but you got to make sure everybody else has access to it, because what if somebody else can help you? What if something happens and you can't come to work for the next couple days? Somebody's got to be able to work on it. So in a triage situation, I would more than likely require you to use the notes on the computer. I'm really just more comfortable with that. I don't like having to look in different situations and then finding out, oh, well, didn't you know we left it over here? It's not helpful. It's not efficient, and just, unnecessary, really. Just a reminder to check out the companies who support the show. My friends at Synergy Dental Partners are offering 2 free months to try out their lower prices for labs, supplies, and select software services. To sign up, visit odysseymgmt.com/synergy, and the link is also in the show notes. Okay, so this is the last part, and this could be your most annoying part, but to me, this was like light at the end of the tunnel. More than likely, after the claims are submitted, the claims are coming back in, you're starting to finally see some cash flow. If the insurance aging was a hot mess, your patient balances were probably a hot mess as well. Perhaps you were not collecting at the time of service. And so you now are faced with sending out statements to people who probably haven't seen you in a couple months. They're going to need reminders of why they have balances. And so this is where I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway. So if you're a very busy office and you really are just, you want to do this with grace, but you just don't have time to do the hand holding, I understand. Go ahead and send out your statements, and the majority of people will pay the statements, okay? A lot of times we're sending out our statements electronically. I prefer electronically. Now, if you've been in the office and you know these patients and you suspect there's going to be an issue, I would probably send an email or maybe even print that statement and put a note on that statement that says, apologies, and this is in the email too, apologies for the late correspondence, because I don't, especially if you're sending it by email, I don't want to mention anything about their appointment. Apologies for the late correspondence. We are cleaning up our systems. Please expect to see a notification from our office. So basically, I'm saying to them, hey, we're sorry. We were fixing things. Please keep an eye out for some sort of letter or notification from us about your existing balance. Maybe I wouldn't even say that in an email because I don't want to implicate anything. But I would also say, please contact the office with any questions. I would absolutely put that on there. And if you're printing it out, that's something nice to handwrite on there, because if you think about it, we should have collected at the time of service. We should have submitted their claims in a timely manner, and we should have tried to do everything we could to avoid surprising them with a balance. Unfortunately, we fell down on that. Maybe you didn't fall down on that, but the office fell down on it. And there's going to be apologies that need to be made, or some sort of acknowledgement, that it's an inconvenience. I also want to make sure that you give them a way to pay you easily. This is a really good time to make sure that you're set up for text to pay or electronic payments. And if you've heard a class of mine in any of the recent times, you know that I'm a big advocate of making life as easy as possible for the patients. I want them to pay me very easily. I want them to schedule with me very easily. I want them to email me very easily or talk to me very easily. So if you're making them write a check and send it by mail, we're looking a little antiquated, I hate to tell you. So make sure that that's all set up too. What are you going to do if somebody comes back at you and is like, this is incorrect, I thought I paid my balance? You're not going to be angry, because they might have a point. You just went through a huge triage operation. It's possible you missed something, but here's an opportunity for us to double check it. So you're going to say, Mrs. Jones, I'm sorry about this confusion. I think that we processed your claim correctly, but what I want to do is take a second look at it. So can you give me a day or two to do that? I'll put a hold on your account so that you don't receive any other statements from us. Give me about 2 days, because I may need to get in touch with the insurance company, and that does take time. So I'm setting expectations. They're not going to get a call back from me later today. You probably are going to have to hop on the portal. Now, unfortunately, you're probably going to be right. There's probably going to be out-of-pocket expenses that are needing to be paid, and then you're going to have to mitigate that in your conversations. This is my perspective here. I have never written it down in an SOP or anything like that. But typically when a patient is angry and it is truly something that the office could have avoided, we should have been better at it. Again, not you, maybe the other people that were there before you, but we do have to own it. And so if somebody has a huge balance they weren't expected, and huge is relative, right? Like, I mean, for a teenager, or for an early 20s person in their first job, $100 is a huge amount of money for them that they weren't expecting. May not be so for other people in different, income brackets. So huge is relative. But any amount of money that they weren't expecting, you want to ask them, how would you like to take care of that? If you've got them on the phone, how would you like to take care of that? They give you a little bit of, this was your fault and all of this stuff. Just say, I understand. Would it make it easier if we were to split this into 2 payments, 3 payments, and we can stretch it out, because I do understand that this was unforeseen. And again, I do apologize, Mrs. Jones. We will absolutely be paying much more attention to the accounts in the future. This has been a learning opportunity for all of us. Am I going to write off a balance? No. Long time ago, maybe. But, I've been doing this too long. I'm not writing off a balance. The patient knew going in there was going to be something, but, writing it off completely is just really unnecessary at this point. So those are the 6 steps that I would go through. As far as, what are we going to do afterwards? How are we going to handle this down the road? Now is when you're going to set the cadence that I was telling you about. You're going to put in your calendar, that you're going to run this report every 2 weeks at a minimum. And this is when you're still kind of in dumpster fire mode, right? Every 2 weeks, you're going to read your notes. You're going to leave even more notes. You're going to work with the doctor to get the documentation. You're going to have some snafus there. Then when you get to a place where you feel comfortable and you really have a handle on it, then you could move to 3 weeks to run the insurance aging report. But I don't know if I would go more than that. In today's day and age, electronically, claims get processed faster. If there's an issue with my claims, I want to catch it sooner than later. In the old days, we would just do, aging reports once a month, but that was back when everything was by snail mail. So let's squeeze the revenue cycle down a little bit, and let's do it a little bit sooner than the, every 4 weeks. Nowadays, I'm guessing you as the insurance coordinator who are now having to, make sure everything is coming up roses, you're going to catch things a lot faster. The next step after all of this is to meet with a doctor, make sure that they're aware actually along the whole way, but meet with a doctor and talk about setting up protocols. If you're in an office that doesn't have written protocols, maybe they had them and the person just ignored them, but you need to have written protocols about your AR, what's to be expected, what intervals you run the reports, how soon or how long between time of service to submitting the claim is appropriate. In many offices, 24 hours is the most. You have to submit that claim with documentation. It's a rule in many offices within 24 hours. If you're a very busy office or you have a slow documenting doctor, maybe 48 hours. But you know what? 48 hours means that's one other day that your cash flow is impacted. I want you to also, at the end of all of this, take a deep breath. So maybe you've listened to this podcast and you're like, okay, wow, that's a lot. I know. Take a deep breath and just understand this isn't going to be fixed very quickly. It's just not. Unfortunately, when you don't pay attention to a system, the longer that happens, the more tangled and convoluted that is. And the good news is that you're not going to let this happen again. And perhaps you hire people that are going to do a better job of tracking it. Or if you're the sole insurance coordinator, now you can make this system yours. You know the checks and balances, and now you can feel good when these claims start rolling in. You start looking like a rock star because you cleaned up this mess. I wish you luck. And I hope that this has been helpful. We'll do another talk about, how we're going to handle patients that don't like to pay their bills. We'll do another talk on that on another time. But I do hope that this is helpful. And if you have any questions, always you can leave a contact. You can fill out the contact form. You can leave a YouTube comment. You can, just find me on social media. You guys know where I am. But I always so much appreciate that you spend your time with me.
We're all super busy, so thank you for making time for me today. The show notes will have any links that we referenced in the episode. You can also find links for my book, events, and my online insurance course, Dental Insurance Design and Management. I speak often around the country on management and insurance issues. Come hang out with me in one of my classes. I promise you'll laugh and learn.